Hi guys, I'm here with Edmund McMillen. And Edmund, my first question is that Super Meat Boy, your first, well, not your first game, but the first game that had a lot of critical acclaim and a lot of sort of promotion behind it, definitely had a lot of hype. I mean, there was articles being written about it almost like a year in advance. How did you respond to all this sort of hype and build up for the game? Did you almost fear that it was going to not live up to the expectations it was being built up?
Oh yeah, I mean, there wasn't actually a lot of positive hype of like this is going to be like going through it, like looking back at it, people seem to have a bit of a skewed memory of exactly how it worked. But going through it, it wasn't like people were saying it was the greatest or anything. Really said it was that we just got a press period just saying that we're working on it. It's going to be coming out X, Y, Z, and other dealings because we wanted to make sure that people knew that we were still working on it because we've been working on it for almost 2 years, and we wanted to keep the hype kind of going. There was a lot of pressure, though, mostly pressure that we put on ourselves to attempt to make the thing that we could make and sacrifice everything to do so. Most of that pressure just came from us and just wanting to make the best thing we can possibly make, and that's what we honestly set out to do. Like, I've been doing this for a long time, and I felt like I could do something pretty, and I wanted to kind of come out of the more mainstream way with something that was substantially better than anything I'd ever done. And of course, I'd spent more time on this game than any game I never worked on. So I'd hope that it would, be well received. But we were both very nervous about how it would be received, and even especially closer to release, we were starting to get a lot of negative feedback from Microsoft saying, people weren't really liking it and it's too hard and they didn't think it was going to do that well. And they even gave us like statistics as far as like where they thought it would perform compared to other games. Those games can't perform really. So we were certain that it wasn't going to do well, which is one of the reasons why we pushed the press so much more to like get the word out to people in hopes that more people would have checked. It was hectic and spirit. But yeah, like a lot of the press that we got was just stuff that we did. Like I made a habit of, excuse me, doing a lot of different trailers, early trailers, teaser trailers, and like just trying to hype the game up and then just sending it to all the press contacts that I had, and doing as many interviews and podcasts as we possibly could. We made a rule to each other that we would never turn down a podcast, no matter how small it was. And we did every single podcast we got requested, including ones by like 12-year-old kids that had never done one before. We really had a way to get as much as possible because we felt like we weren't going to get the support that we thought we were going to get from Microsoft, and which ended up happening. And we kind of pushed so hard.
You sort of hinted at one of my other questions, and that was Microsoft thought the game was too hard. But I found the game sort of found a magnificent balance between challenging and frustrating. Was that like what took so long with the development process? Like, how did you find that balance? Because it's sort of like
that wasn't the. I mean, balancing was something that took some time, but it really wasn't the game. I mean, I think we worked on it for months, and in that side, we did it very, very quickly. It should have been a 2-year game, but we had to cut it short in order to release in this promotion that Microsoft wanted us to do, which actually hurt the because it got some content and we didn't have enough time to polish it more than we wanted to polish it a bit more. But when it comes to Microsoft and how they projected and stuff like that, most of the stuff that we heard was that their business, it's all business people, like their business and marketing people didn't that a 2D could that well. And at that point in time, felt like 3D games were in more, and they felt like games that were story-driven and a bit easier, I think, was like the consensus that they just felt like we couldn't charge, the full 15 for it. Like they felt like it wouldn't perform that well because they were basically very they were very sold on the idea that it would do well only with hardcore fans, which is a minority of people on Xbox Live, like hardcore platformer fans, and that was basically where they felt like the game would do well, but never like in a mainstream successful way. It wouldn't like be this. I don't think they thought it would be a breakout hit. They projected every other game in the pack that we were in to be way better than us. We ended up like quadrupling all those games.
Oh wow!
In sales, but yeah, it's just business marketing. I mean, our guy, like our producer, was sure that the game was going to do as well as it did. Like he backed it and supported it 100%. Like he was the one who campaigned for us. He was the one that convinced everybody that this game was going to do well, and he was going to be the one that basically held it up and made sure it didn't get canned. And he believed in it the whole time and saw for what it is because he's a gamer and he is the producer of all the biggest, best Xbox Live games like Braid, Castle Crushers. So he knows what he's doing, and he basically championed us and helped us greatly. If it wasn't for him, we would never come out. But business and marketing have a very different idea of how things work, and statistics are. They like to think that it's a science, but it's just a guessing game.
But I was sort of asking, like, how did you make it hard, but not to the point where a player would want to stop playing? Like, a good example would be the game VVVVV, the game with 6 Vs. That's like challenging, but it's not frustrating. And I think that's like sort of the same thing with Super Meat Boy.
Yeah,
you could die 10,000 times, but still want to keep playing.
Yeah, and that was that was our first goal when we set out to make it. It was, how can we make a really challenging game without it being as frustrating as games. It's really easy when you think really hard about it. It's really easy to pick apart a game and figure out why it's frustrating and what you can do to avoid it. Like old platformers and stuff, really good ones, are still legitimately fun and good, but they usually have that negative quality of being really frustrating because of the penalties involved, and it all has to do with penalty. And if you remove these penalties, you can actually balance difficulty without penalty, and you could raise the difficulty, so you make the reward system even greater. So if you make a level harder, the player feels even better when they beat it. But if you remove the penalty of lives and whatever else, you actually like balance it in a way that makes the game more satisfying. Because when you complete things that are hard, you are more satisfied, as if they were easy or handed to you or whatever else. Like, you feel more accomplished. Like, I don't think anybody would argue right now that beating Mario 1 is way more satisfying than beating the latest Mario, because you feel like you've accomplished something much harder, and it was much harder. And there's just something there, and it has a lot to do with the frustration factor and not holding the player's hand and not talking down to them and treating them like they're little children and treating them like, we know you understand how to play a game. We know this is what you want, and we're going to give you what you want without, you getting to the point of throwing the controller at the wall or, losing your progress because you died.
Were those old platformers the main influences for Super Meat Boy? What were the sort of other influences involved?
Honestly, all video games were involved in influencing Super Meat Boy, because in a lot of ways it was Tommy and I. It was our kind of like love letter to video games in general, like indie games, old school games we grew up with. It's just an amalgamation of everything we kind of experienced with video games, mostly platformers. And that's kind of a homage to so many different games, and like the intros and so many, lots of throwbacks and references to many different things, including creation of Super Meat Boy, which is SMB. It's all our gift back to all the video games that we grew up with and that inspired us to make games.
Another thing that's very noticeable about Super Meat Boy is its sort of bizarre sense of humor. Where did that come from, and do you think that was sort of it benefits the game, that it sort of makes people more able to withstand the puzzle gameplay, sort of like Portal? It's a puzzle game, but it has the humor to keep people sort of involved and not, I guess, bore them. Do you think that the humor was not only necessary but sort of benefited Super Meat Boy? Or
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think so. I mean, it wasn't an intentional thing. Like, I want to make a game like so more people will like it. It's more like I want to make the game with a certain character because that's what I find interesting. Like, it keeps me interested in the game. It keeps me interested in the characters and whatever else. So I just kind of go with I feel inspired to do. But yeah, I mean, I tend to all the games I've worked on tend to have pretty odd or quirky stories with kind of funny characters, dark humor. That's just kind of my personality. It's hard for me to avoid. I don't want to make a game as void of that.
speaking,
So yeah, I guess people like it. I mean, they like the character. They like the.
I know, but how do you come up with like a fetus in a jar as your villain? Where does that like? What?
I actually made Dark. All the characters, Meat Boy and Dark. From I just sat down and I'm working on. It was a long time ago, actually. Like I did a lot of different types of games, and I did these series of games called the Badlands, which had an ongoing theme. And I got really tired of it, and I was like, I'm pretty over this, but I want to do like a new set of characters, like a new style of characters, and I wanted them to all be like superheroes that were flawed in some major way that made them more likable and unique. And the fact that like Meat Boy can't ever really die yet, he doesn't have skin, and he's like this ninja, but like super agile and everything. But everything he's doing is he's probably in great pain the whole time because he doesn't. He has no skin, so he's running around and it's probably hurting. And there's that whole sadistic, kind of masochistic side to it, where he knows that he's going to come back again, that sort of thing. And it's actually something that Tommy and I are going to play around with a lot more in the remake, the Super Meat Boy the game. But yeah, Dr. Fetus was just a sketch on paper where I thought, I wanted to make a villain, a traditional villain. Like, he's just totally like a silent movie style villain, traditional villain, at monocle, suit. But I give him something that made him childlike, and I just took it even further and made him fetus-like. There's an innocence to it. Like, can't help but, people like, big and whatever else, and it's funny to play with the baby villain. And I just thought it'd be more fun to even go further than that and, play around with the idea of a character be perceived completely innocent because he's an evil villain who's, hell-bent on destroying everything that lives. I just thought it was fun, so I did it. That's how all my characters kind of work. Like, I don't think there's any character that I've made that isn't majorly in some way has something that very unique about them that stands out as like weird or just odd in some way that makes them different.
Sort of speaking of that sort of darker subject matter, your other game, The Binding of Isaac, deals with the idea of religious extremism. When did you decide that was the issue you wanted to tackle in a game?
It wasn't really that I decided that, or like, as a game jam, it was just like, hey, whatever comes to mind, because we're going to work on this prototype for a week. And I didn't really take it that seriously. I just wanted to do something kind of unbridled and fun. And I came up with a mechanic first where I was play like once or I'll play through the first Zelda because it's my favorite game. But playing through Zelda, and I kind of suddenly realized that the dungeon structures in Zelda have a really good formula to them that could be applied to a roguelike, randomized, basically built. I started sketching, and I basically had this structure based around Zelda. And the whole idea of Zelda, like when Miyamoto made it, it was based around the idea of him kind of exploring when he was a kid, and imagining he's a hero and turning over rocks, and finding bugs and all that sort of stuff too, and exploration alone as a child. And I kind of wanted to explore that as well, but kind of explore the dark side to that, to in a lot of ways, I don't know if you're familiar with my game Ether, but in Ether it explores the negative of children who like recede into their imagination. And with Isaac, it was a way for me to play with that again, but play with it in a familiar way where religion plays a role in what's going on. How religion affects a child, especially extreme religion. And I pulled a lot from me growing up Catholic and having my mom's side of the family, they're all Catholic, and then my dad's side of the family were born again Christian, which are pretty hardcore. And at a young age, I got told that I was going to go to hell for, playing Magic or D&D and all that sort of stuff too. And I just kind of pulled from all the really dark aspects of how religion affected me as a kid. And also some of the positive, because in a lot of, if I ever had that in, I would have never made, there's a lot of imagery in the game that is very inspired by the Bible, because, if you look at the Bible as a religion, it's it's very Revelations, like that fire and brimstone stuff is pretty awesome, and it inspires, most grandiose movies pull a lot from the Bible, and it's hard not to be inspired by it. So it was a deal where, in a lot of ways, my religious upbringing inspired the positives and the negatives of the game, and I just kind of went in with it open, and I just knew I wanted to explore those. A lot of stuff came from. I'm into all like religious stuff. Like I'm interested in religion, and I'm interested in Christian extremism, especially in the '80s when they were like attacking D&D for being evil and that sort of stuff too. And back in the '80s, a lot of like propaganda in video form, and I started downloading a lot of that stuff. And you get all this crazy like people claiming that they grew up in satanic, communities where they were ritualistically abused and so on and so forth. And it was really dark, but really interesting in a way, because these people seem to be making this stuff up in really ways. They like crazy, but really creative stories that were impossible. They could never have happened. And they didn't. And it's actually been proven by the government. The government actually did a bunch of research on satanic cults in the 80s, and they could never actually find one that did any ritualistic sacrifice or anything. It's quite extensive. But there was a lot of propaganda going around that caused this paranoia in the Messis area. And a lot of people actually went to jail. It was kind of like a Salem situation again, where a lot of people that were, considered to be dark or pagan were taken to court for abusing children and then actually acquitted. It was stuff that I kind of saw part of growing up. I'd hear all these stories about, this kid that played D&D and got so immersed in it that he killed himself and killed his family, and just all this crazy sort of stuff that I hear from different parts of my family. And then on my family, I don't know how many times I would hear, oh, it's the signs of the times, the world's going to end. And when you grow up with that sort of stuff, it bleeds into you, And, I was lucky enough to be able to separate reality, fantasy, and didn't end a lot of that stuff seriously, but, I could see how that sort of stuff could be damaging to a child. And I wanted to explore that in a creative way. And that's basically the story of Isaac is. And that's kind of where it all came from.
And as brilliant and as sort of deep as that is, and that, like, I find that amazing that a game could be able to produce such a message. Unfortunately, I don't think a AAA game would be able to do that just out of fear for a controversy. I mean, you've experienced sort of the business side of gaming, and they're like worshiping statistics. Do you think your sort of role as an indie game developer makes you more capable of making games that can tackle such issues? Or do you think indie games in general have that sort of role, that they can talk about things that a AAA game can't?
Yeah. In a lot of ways, I've been seeing this a lot too, and I want to be really clear on what I'm saying because it's easy for people to take it the wrong way. Since Indie Game the movie came out, of course the response has been really great, but there's this kind of bizarre mentality of a mainstream audience who plays video games that thinks that somehow indie games are the opposite of mainstream games in terms of like rivalry. Like there's this kind of bizarre idea that developers hate mainstream games and think that they're just better than them and so on and so forth. And I don't want to continue that because it's in no way true. I don't know any independent developer who doesn't play mainstream games. Like that just doesn't exist. There's no such thing. It's a fictional persona that people are making up that there's indies out there who are not, they don't play mainstream games. And it all comes from the fact that indies be a bit critical of mainstream games, which is good. It's good for us to be critical of everything, to make sure that it heads down the right path. But what I'm getting at is independent games you're right. They have the ability to say and do things that the mainstream can't because fear of risk of money. That's what it comes down to. And the reality of the situation is most places would be able to publish things like this. But money is a big, big deal business. Independent money doesn't matter that much, so you can take bigger risks. You can destroy your career, making something so controversial that be ostracized for it. It doesn't even matter. And in a lot of ways, it doesn't usually hurt. Like, it doesn't usually affect anything negatively. But in the mainstream, if someone were to do something like that, it could crush a whole company and everybody could lose their job, so they don't risk it. Even to the point where, I think most people know the Play Binding of Isaac, that Nintendo rejected Isaac because of its religious. And it wasn't really because of blasphemous in any way or anything like that. It was more along the lines of, since it spoke of religion in any way, they kind of didn't want to align themselves with it. Religion is something people kill each other over. And that's a sad reality. And when you're a big business, you don't want to risk upsetting a group of people. And when you're risking a lot of money and people, you're just not going to take that kind of risk. And the same thing goes for any game design. You don't see, and it gets worse, of course, with the economy. So the worse the economy is, the more you're going to see sequel and just rehashed garbage in the mainstream. This is just fact. It's just a reality. When our economy gets a little better, or if some business person is convinced that the reason why indie games are booming right now is because of their originality and the fact that they take risks, that might actually change something. But right now, since the economy is so bad, people are going to lean on IPs. They're going to lean on stuff that is proven to sell. They're going to lean on graphs and polls that say this game and this game sell better because of X, Y, Z. And they're not going to take big risks, and you're not going to see really anything that in the main at all. Simply because it's just not. When you're making a mainstream game, you're making it with millions of dollars and a shitload of people. If your game fails, your company goes under, and you simply can't risk it. And in indie games, it's the opposite. In a lot of ways, it's our job as independents to make sure that we kind of push the envelope and kind of expand the area of play in a way. Like it's I think there was a fishing analogy that John Blow made, where it's the mainstream is this big, large group, this big fishing boat, right? And the fishing boat knows that there's fish in this one location. It's always there. There's always a big school of fish there. So they always fish there. And they fish and fish, and eventually it's a little smaller. They never take the risk of going elsewhere because they're invested so much in this fishing boat. Now, independents have these little boats, and they can go out further and fish around for bigger, crazier fish. There's a risk of not catching anything at all. There's a risk coming up empty-handed, which happens with independent games. There's also the chance of catching a whale, and just having this windfall of, money and success and everything else, because you're taking that risk and going outside of this zone. That's what independents do. They have the ability financially and creatively to leave this comfort zone that the mainstream is stuck in and potentially make something amazing. And the cool thing is once that's proven, then the mainstream can like push that area. Once they see that someone's catching whales over in this area, they can move the boat over there and they could start fishing that area too. But it's, you need innovative people to do this. And luckily, there's a lot of innovative people in independent scene. And it's pretty cool to see even old developers going indie, and hopefully they will be taking bigger risks as well, and push video games more towards art and a little bit away from business, so we can progress it more and making better games. So it'll happen eventually, and it's definitely like a renaissance right now with independent games. There's a lot of really great stuff. It seems like every year there's at least 3 really huge, groundbreaking indie games that are just critically acclaimed and selling copies. So it's good that that's there. It's good that the option's there, and it's good that these games are getting more attention.
I do want to talk about Indie Game the movie, but before that, you said that Nintendo turned down Isaac because they just didn't want to touch the idea of religion. Have you received any sort of like mail or, I guess, threats because you dealt with religion in your game? I mean, did you have any bad backlash because of it?
No, absolutely nothing. Never. I've never, and I actually made a bet with Tommy. He wasn't involved with Isaac, but he was around during development. He was actually living with me, and I remember, I think he said something like his mom was worried that because he was way aligned Isaac development, that it could affect our next game and possibly our careers. And he's like, I don't think that's true, but do you ever think about that? And of course, there's my worry. Religious people that are extremists are pretty crazy and do some crazy shit. But I just thought about it in a logical way possible. And the people who play this game will not be those people. Those people, it will never cross over into their world. Like, it just won't. And it never has. I've never gotten one, and I've never even seen a comment that said that they were even remotely offended by the game when it came to religion. Because it doesn't really, it's not made to offend. Like, I didn't make the game to show up a bunch of Christians and Catholics. I'm not some atheist. I'm an agnostic. I'm not saying what's wrong. I'm just talking about something, and there's two. I mean, you could say it leans more towards, an anti-religious stance, but enough is there on both sides for people to just take what they want and then, leave what they don't, and fine with it. But it's actually nice to say, I honestly think that the reason why I'm not getting this kind of backlash is because this demographic of people that, that are on the internet and play video games simply aren't ignorant. They're really not that ignorant. Like, they're not that bad. And it's really a nice thought, because the internet's a pretty fucking horrible place. But it's not horrible in that respect. Like, it's really not that horrible in this alienating kind of, extremist religion sort of horrible way that reality can be sometimes in the U.S. Those people simply don't venture into this world, and it's nice to know that they're there. No doubt, like, if I were ever to get published, though, like if it were to ever come out like on a Nintendo console and and got more press in a mainstream way, yeah, maybe there might be some religious extremists that might want to say or do something. But man, I've been getting hate mail since I was 9 years old. So, used to it, but I had a feeling that I wasn't going to get any backlash from it, and I never did. The only even slight backlash I got was in Germany. It wasn't really backlash. It was I forget what they're called, but it's basically like ESRB, but in And
Is it Peggy, or is that's Australia's?
What was that?
Peggy, or is that Australia's?
It might be that. I don't know. But Binding of Isaac was the first game to get a raised rating due to blasphemy, and they actually put it like on the website. You go there and it's plus for me this and this. It was the first time it ever got that rating. I wasn't even aware until the publisher said, you should see this fiasco that's happening with this ratings board thing, because I guess a lot of people in Germany got really, really upset that they will rating for something considered blasphemous, because the definition of blasphemy is pretty relative depending on the person. What's blasphemous to somebody isn't blasphemous to somebody else. So how can you put that on there? And it seemed odd, but you got to remember, in Germany, very careful who they offend religiously, especially people who would be reading, the Bible, and the Binding of Isaac is in the Jewish Bible as well. So I can understand why they would want to make sure that they put that on there just in case. But there was never any negative reaction to the game, only to the fact that the ESRB over there rated it higher because of its blasphemous content, or what was perceived as blasphemous content. But yeah, that was the only. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's an honor to be like the first game to be rated higher for blasphemy. That's something I definitely, check off my list of things I've wanted to do my whole life. I always wanted to have a game that was on some sort of banned list or some sort of controversial list in some way, just so I could say that I did it. I didn't think Isaac would be it, but just at least and say, that Binding of Isaac was the first game to, be touted as blasphemous by a ratings board. But yeah, other than that, it's been a surprise, man. I was from past that they love the game. They just wanted to let me know that, and they don't see it as a negative to the church in a way. It's weird. It's cool. Like, it's just cool that there's so many open-minded, progressive people that are still religious. It gives me a lot of faith in hope it progresses in a way that opens itself up a bit more, and instead of locking itself off from everybody else.
Sort of switching gears, you and the rest of the team meet. I can't remember the other person's name. I'm sorry about that. You were both featured on Indie Game the Movie. Do you want to talk?
Tommy Reffinus is his name.
Tommy, we're both featured in Indie Game the Movie. You want to talk about that experience? Like, how did you feel that they wanted to feature you, Jonathan Blow, and Phil Fish, like the three, I guess, titans of the indie game industry, you could say?
Yeah.
Did that blow your mind that you could be considered that in the same league as, say, John Blow, who everybody thinks is sort of like a indie game god? Or how did you feel that they chose you to be their main focus of a movie?
Yeah, original was it's another one of those things it's a weird kind of illusion to people who see the movie and they're like again, I hear sometimes confused response about the content of the movie, and people wondering why they chose, like, number one that I see the most reoccurring is why did they choose to film only people who succeed? And anybody use their brains and realize that they didn't know that, other than Braid, they had no way of knowing that any of the games would have succeeded, really. It was a guessing game. But to get back to the original question, when I met them, the movie that you guys saw, the movie they make, is a completely different movie. They were talking to 20 different developers, and we were just one group, one team of 20 that they were talking to. And they basically introduced themselves to us at GC. They were filming us. I didn't know who they were. Tommy had known who. And then they asked if they could come and, like, film us in Santa Cruz and just do a few little interviews. They said that they wanted to do... One second, let me close... They wanted to do a documentary that was kind of like a which was like vignettes of different things. They wanted to do like little 10-minute vignettes, different developers making different games, which is why it has the name Indie Game the Movie. So I was like, why is it called Indie Game the Movie when it's just about these three different, teams in three different games? Like, it doesn't, like, it and they're right, because it doesn't really fit this movie, but it fit the original movie, which was supposed to be a movie about a big range of the different indie games that were being made. They came back and did, they recorded a shitload. I guess when they got back to Canada, they're Canadian filmmakers, they went through their footage and to put together a trailer for their movie so they could get it kickstarted so they could actually start filming it more. And what they put together was a piece about a game I had done called Ether. And you can see that they're still on there. It's funny because if you look at that piece, you see presented it as like this, I think it was like an 8-minute piece on me making that game and the story behind it. Like, that's what the was going to be. It was going to be a bunch of those. So they released that as what they intended. And they put that out on Kickstarter and they get kickstarted. They get a bunch of money really, really quick, and then they set out again and they go and film more developers, and like they all around a bunch of different developers for weeks. Filming everybody. Then they finally came back to us, and they came back to us at a time where we were a lot further along in development, and I think we were getting pretty stressed that they were filming us. And they were like, we really like the footage that we're getting of you, and we're hoping we can come back for your launch and maybe film you during launch. And it was like, oh God, like, it was already a really stressful situation, but they were really, really nice people. They kind of just faded into the background at times. So we're like, okay, whatever. Like, you can't get any more stressful than it's already going to be. And they came back and they filmed us for the last like 2 weeks or whatever of launch, and then a few days after launch, and they went back up to. Then they filmed a bunch more people out, and then they contacted us and said, we're heading in a new direction with the movie. We want to do a story-driven movie now. Like, we have a story arc here. Like, we have you from when we filmed you at GDC all the way to, through development to you launching and you talking about development and everything. And then after the fact, like, we have this full story here. And we're also getting a story with which they were still at the time. And they there was actually another developer that was going to be the fourth team in the movie. They should probably be talking about this instead of me, but that was going to be another main focus. It was cut due to just overall time. The movie was just too long. And basically, like, we want to go with more of an emotional, broad type movie that could speak to a large audience because everybody can relate to the story of just a creative person doing what they love and the process, the hardships and everything else. And that's basically what they kind of pitch us. They're like, this is what it's just basically going to be you guys, Phil, John, and this other developer, and that's going to be what Indie Game the Movie is. And they even talked about the idea of changing the name because they knew it didn't really fit as well, but they couldn't come up with anything else. And the fact that they've been promoting the as the movie for like a year, they couldn't really go back. So they just refocused the movie on the story, and they showed it to us, and it was just amazing. I was just floored. Like, they did just such an amazing job. Movie. It was great. I thought it was really inspiring. It made me want to make more games, and I just envisioned that it would inspire more people. And yeah, I mean, they had my blessing the whole way through. I had a feeling that they were going to do great regardless. The really thing is that they have all that footage still of all those other developers. They still have all that stuff, and they're going to be trying to like recompile it basically into the movie that they were originally going to make, and they're just going to release it as like the special edition extras for kind of get to see everything that they scrapped, or the original idea, which I think will be pretty good, because the only people who ever say anything negative about the movie tend to be other developers who are like, I wish there was more of a range of developers interviewed. I wish they focused on design. It's just a success story. And I'm quite positive that all those things are addressed in in the rest of the film that they're making, essentially. But yeah, it was worth it. Very worth it. It's very odd to see yourself in a movie. It's an odder to see yourself in a movie that's like the highest rated movie of the year. You go to Rotten Tomatoes and it's like tied for the #1 spot of the highest rated movie of 2000. Not to them, but there are some pretty shitty movies that released this year. But yeah, they did a phenomenal job. And it's nice to see so many positive reviews. It's very odd after the struggled with, so did Tom, because it's really odd to be included in something when you're known for being a creative person who makes art or whatever. People know you through your work. Like nobody, unless they're like a super fan or something. No, me. Nobody knows Edmund McMillen, and I'm a fan of Edmund McMillen. That's very small. It was a very small percentage of people. Most people will be like, I like Super Meat Boy. I love that game. And that's something that I'm okay with and I'm used to. I'm completely fine with people being fans of my work. I like that. I love that. Being fans of me, I don't like that. I don't completely understand it. In a lot of ways, it's frustrating. I like that I inspire people, but I don't know how to deal with somebody coming up and saying, I really liked you in this movie. That's really odd to me. And I don't know how to deal with it. I also don't like being for playing the role of Edmund in the movie, because I really want to be known for my work and not for my persona or whatever. My work is way more interesting than me. The movie may be cut. You take all the cool, crazy moments of Meat Boy development, and you cut it down to 90-minute movie, and I'll probably appear pretty fucking interesting. But in reality, that's not really who I am. I'm a much more broad person. This scene. I have more of a range. I'm not just an overworked nut who is smiling all the time because I'm losing my mind. But yeah, the movie definitely had pros and cons, and I had mixed feelings about the release. Not about the quality of the movie or at all, more about people's perspective of me and how people would kind of react to it. I'm not a social person, and when we kind of I did a few Q&As in person at some movie screenings, and the Q&As were fine. I can talk, but interacting with people afterwards was a bit awkward, and I'm just not really good. And since then, I got myself on the internet, social internet scene. Like I had Twitter, I had an open Facebook that anybody could friend me. I had, an open email who could basically get at me in any way. Like if they're fans, I want them to be able to kind of like. I didn't want to come off like an asshole. Like I've been disappointed by a lot of heroes of growing up that I would get in contact that turn out to be assholes. So I had this thing in the back of my head that said, like, if I ever make it, I want to be accessible to the fans, and I don't want to be that asshole that these people were to me. And sadly, I'm avoiding the asshole part by I felt my becoming an ass, so I wanted to dodge that, and I saw myself getting a bit annoyed at fans and getting just annoyed at this perceived fame in general. I didn't like it. I never really set out to do it. So instead of becoming an old curmudgeon asshole, I decided to just completely remove myself from that kind of accessibility. So I blocked everybody from AIM, and I removed my Twitter got hacked, but I never got it back. I deleted it, and then I made Facebook private. I removed Google alerts. I don't even get alerted when anybody writes reviews anymore. I don't need to see it anymore, and I'm quite over myself. Very, very over myself. I could go at least 10 years without hearing my name and being fine at this point. Cool. Oh, yeah, the movie was a life-changing experience, and I'm happy to say I feel pretty positive about it. I feel really good about it overall at this point now, being where I am now, moving myself kind of the negative aspects of the internet and or destructive or just kind of throwing my time away aspects of the internet. And yeah, I'm in a good place right now, and I'm feeling motivated to work and continue. And I do try to fan emails on the occasion still, trying my best to make sure people know that I'm not. I mean, I guess I am an asshole in a way, but I'm not the kind of asshole that doesn't want people to be creative and be inspired by my work. I really do. I want nothing than everybody in the world to share the joy that I get from making stuff. Like, being creative and making things is the best feeling in the world. Like, it's a crucial. You need it. It heals your soul. It sounds very hippie-ish to say, but making art is, at least for me, the only way I can stay true, happy, balanced, and to inspire people to do the same and even get the smallest bit back is a huge honor. And if the movie, does that for people, if my games do that for people, then I can totally die happy and feel like I've accomplished something. It's to be a creative person. It's a very big thing. And I hope that everybody can find that kind of outlet in some way.
Well, just listening to you, you're very self-deprecating. First of all, I don't think you're an asshole at all. And second of all, you are a very interesting person. Even out, just in this interview, you're probably the most interesting person I've interviewed so far. So I don't think you need to worry about that. When you met the other developers, I guess, throughout the process of the movie and at the premiere, what do they like, say, John Blow or Phil Fish? I've heard John Blow is sort of I don't want to say an oddball, but he just has a very interesting personality. Can you share your feelings on the other developers you met?
Yeah, I know. I mean, the independent scene, especially the one that I started from, I started really getting into independent games, so you can call it this. There's no better way to call it anything else, but even though I hate a scene, it is. I got into the independent scene around 2005, and there's a lot of old school indies that kind of started around the same time. It really boomed in 2008. I believe in 2009 is when I met Phil for the first time. I met John in 2008, and none people realize it because I think they avoided it due to confusion in the movie, but I was Braid. So I've known John for a long time. I was the character artist and for Braid. So I made him and did all the animation for everything, and then David Hellman kind of painted everything in the background style and in his style. So I worked with John on Braid in that respect. So I've known him for a while. I know his personality, and I know him personally. He's a great guy. He's a very smart guy, obviously. I mean, he's a very smart guy. He thinks a lot. He's very critically things which puts people off, I guess, and they think that he's pompous. But really, he's not. He just really wants what's best for the independent scene and games in general. He doesn't care about the independent scene. He cares about games. He really does. He feels very passionately about games and openly about them. I've never heard him say something that wasn't backed up in some way by a very logical reason. He's never pompous or pretentious in any way to me. I think everything he does is, and I thought Braid was quite moving. I thought it was great. It's one of the greatest, indie games made, one of the better games made. It's hard. He doesn't come off bad in the movie, but he, again, the movie is hard. It's hard to say, it's hard to encompass who you are in a few minutes in a movie. John comes off as a one-dimensional person in the movie. He just comes off on the smart guy who feels like his work isn't being completely appreciated in the way that he wanted. that's how he comes off in the movie. In reality, of course, the guy has a real personality. Like, he goes further than just that. He's a very unique guy. He does like ballroom dancing, and he's like a master at like jujitsu. Like, he's got all these like really quirky elements to him that make him a very interesting person. That you would be like, how the fuck? Like, I would never assume that John Blow would be like that. He's also, I forget the game that he plays. Like, I think like Counter-Strike or something, that he played some shooter like in tournaments. Like, he was a tournament player. Like, and he's been in the industry for forever. Like, he's worked on a lot of games, and he's basically been the brain. Like, you know, if people used to contract him out to fix their game, essentially. And he was a writer for many years too, in the video game scene for like game dev and stuff, and he would write critical articles about a lot of different things. He's been doing this for longer than anybody that I know personally, and he's a really funny guy. You wouldn't think it from what he is. And Phil, Phil's and this isn't a knock to Phil, but I feel like Phil is the person that comes off the most like how he really is in the movie, because he really is like that. He's high drama. Every time I've talked with him in person, some shit down, he's gonna flip out in some way. He's just a really passionate kind of guy who tends to put his foot in his mouth and just say what's on his mind. And I think he kind of gets off on rubbing people the wrong a lot of ways. I think he enjoys the kind of negative attention that he gets because it kind of fuels the fire, and I think he really needed that kind of fuel to finish his game. But yeah, he's very new. I mean, he's been on as for forever, but before that, that was his first game independently, which is why the game took so long to come out. And you never want to go into your first game as this big giant game for a console. Like, I'm surprised it saw the light of day. Really didn't think. So that's another thing too in the movie. Like, they featured, and that was guaranteed success. The time they finished that, I thought that if you asked me if I thought Fez was going to say no way it's coming out, and that around the time right after the patch chilling and stuff that you saw in the movie, like, they were still another year of development after what you saw, and I was quite positive that the game was never going to be finished. Like, he just seemed too depressed, too much shit was going on, the game was breaking too much, it seemed up in the air, and it seemed like how it was going to be in the movie. Like, it seemed in a lot of ways that Fez's development was the cautionary tale in the movie, but it just so happens that he fucking got it done, and it got really good reviews and sold really well, and kind of added to the negative aspect of the movie where everybody succeeds, which is not the case in independent games, of course. Few independent games succeed. They just got really lucky with that, and Phil finished his game, and it turned out it was actually really good. So, but Tommy does not come off like Tommy in the movie. I think Tommy had the worst representation of who he actually was because of kind of stress under threat. He is a really funny guy. Like, I highly recommend anybody who sees the movie to watch it again with the commentary, so you have a bigger picture of who we both are. Because if you watch the movie with the commentary, you'll see that's essentially what development was like for us before it got stressful. Like, we worked on Meat Boy for 18 months, and the first year of development was exactly like what you hear in the commentary. It was just a little boys' party, a little fun party, like when you're in like just goofing off the whole time. But we were actually making something. Like, it was very fun. It wasn't stressful at all. Only good things were happening, and it felt really fun to time. And they kind of catch Tommy in a lot of different ways, not so polite, due to that he's so stressed out, and there's just so much writing on everything, and the reality of the situation is that Tommy was doing more work than I was. And you can't avoid that. Like if you're the only programmer involved and you're going through certification, I can only help so much. In the end, it's him that's doing all the work and him that's staying up for days on end, and it's him that's writing off of if it does certification. So he's more proud than I am, and that in the movie he's so miserable, and he was miserable for quite a while because right after the movie closed, he had to go even more stressful experience, which was porting Xbox version to PC and getting it functional enough to run on everybody's computers, which is an insanely hard thing to do. And it took a while to repatch until it worked enough on most people's computers to kind of go. And sadly, he got a lot of guff for it, even though he did something that was phenomenal. Like, it's quite unheard of for one man to write an engine all by himself that it actually ran on the Wii, the PlayStation, the Xbox, PC, and the Mac. Somebody had all by themselves and poured it from console to PC in a month is very unheard of. And he just got run over by everything. He's doing it now. As you saw in the movie, like, we started the next game and he's moved out of North Carolina. He's been with his current girlfriend for almost a year. He lives in San Francisco in a really nice place, and he's much, much healthier. Like, he's gained about 20 pounds since the movie. He looks really good, and he's quite healthy now compared to how he was before. But in the movie, he comes off as this just, like, beat down, person who looks like he's dying, and that's was at that point in time, and I know he doesn't really like how he kind of came off in the movie, because he hates the idea that people know him as just that person, like just the person he was for a month of his whole life. Gets caught on film, and then everybody kind of assumes you're this, like, super stressed out, on the verge of breaking down, nourished. And he's not like that at all. He's a very funny, very happy, very caring guy, and he doesn't get his. I don't know if he gets his fair shake in the movie, but listen to the commentary and see what kind of person Tommy is. I think it paints a much better picture of who he is, and unfollow for the special to hear from him how he feels now compared to how he felt then. But yeah, I think it covered the people in the movie. My wife is exactly like how she is in the movie. That's how she is. She likes cat. Now she's shoes, and she's into jewelry, and of course she makes shitloads of plush of everything that I do. The one who our home mom and pop. She makes a pretty penny doing it, so she's definitely pulling her weight here.
My last question is, what are your views on piracy? I mean, I'm sure Super Meat Boy has been pirated many times since it came to PC, maybe even when it was on the Xbox Arcade. What are your feelings on it, as not just an indie game developer, but just as a gamer in general?
I don't believe piracy actually affects much, personally. I really don't care. I can't really care. I grew up in this and pirated music, movies, since you were able to. And I'm at a point now where I can freely purchase whatever. Like, of course, I had to pirate Flash. I was 19 years old, and I wanted to make a game and I wanted to make an animation. Like, how in the hell am I supposed to save up, $1,000, whatever it was back then, for this thing that I desperately just wanted to be creative with? I think they know that, Like, I think they know that, and I think it's just kind of, it's really easy for business people, piracy, like, what they're losing, when the reality of the situation is the people that weren't by it. Like, they simply weren't. there's always the exception to the rule. I'd go as far as to saying, like, whoever at HBO was fighting the idea of Game of Thrones not being able, like, if it's streamed, so I have cable, so I had to pirate. I would have easily paid $10 an episode to stream that shit. Easily done it. I'm not interested in HBO. I don't want the whole station. I don't, like, just give me the show. If that would have been an option, they would have made a shitload of money, and not many people would have pirated. Some piracy just in the ass. You run the risk of getting viruses. Sometimes in the ass to fuck the shit that you want. It's not actually that easy to do. Which is why I believe that games on Steam aren't pirated as frequently, because it's so easy. Steam makes it so easy to get a game and download it. And that's basically what I think a lot of developers and, anybody in the digital age needs to do. It's as hard as you think to make it easier for people to pay for something than do it. You'd be surprised. It simply isn't. And, like, I think, like, places like Steam, and then Hulu, Humble Bundle, all these different kind of, like, more innovative digital distributors are in a lot of ways fighting piracy. But I personally believe it can only be fought far. And I believe as far as it can go, something like a platform like Steam, whatever else, I think it's easier to do. The reality of the situation is a lot of the piracy that happens comes from other countries that simply they're not even legally allowed to own these things. Like, you can't purchase them. Like in Brazil, we have fans in Brazil. If you're in Brazil, I don't fucking care. I mean, I don't care if you pirate anything of mine, period. If you got the money to buy it, like if you pirate Binding of Isaac, it's a fucking $5 game. If you pirate Binding of Isaac, you've done it. Whatever, I don't really care. But if you really, really liked it and you see it on sale in some bundle or something else, feel free to buy it. So you have a copy if you want it. So you do give a bit back. But if you don't, I don't know, it's not a huge deal. I just want people to I want people to play. Like, I don't care about piracy because I didn't really get in this for the business aspect. I got in because I want a lot of people to play. And the reality of the situation is, I know there are over 1 million plus, I think it's up to 1.5 million people that actually bought and paid for Super Meat Boy on my train of thought. I'm sorry.
Take your time.
No, it's my wife was touching my head. I totally got confused. And I have no idea what I was saying. Don't chime in.
She can chime in if she wants.
I was just going to chime in that we have a lot of fans, like one of our super fans is from Brazil, and I'm assuming legitimately buy the game, but he has bought a retail edition from us, which I just put toy on the custom form, so hopefully there hasn't been a problem. But the people in other countries support our shops, so they definitely make up for buying a ton of merchandise.
I think it's something in Brazil, like, in Brazil, they tax video games by, like, 60% or something horrible.
Jeez.
Like a $50 game over there is over $100, I'm pretty sure. It's really bad, and I think it also has a lot to do with it's harder to get ESR in Brazil. It's much more expensive. Like, they discourage video games over there, essentially. So there's a lot of piracy for video games from Brazil because they simply can't get access in a realistic way to that sort of stuff. And of course, like, if you're in a country that you simply can't buy my game in any way, of course I would encourage you to pirate. If it's not something that you can purchase legitimately, please do, because I really like it if you play games. Like, that's why I made them to be played. If you can pay for it, I prefer, but if you can't, or if it's even illegal in your country, I encourage you to break the law and play my games by all means. That's what I made them for. I didn't make these games to be a millionaire. I made them because they're fun to make, and I put them out there because I want people to play them. So I'm not really hurt by piracy. And it's a funny thing, because in a lot of ways, I remember growing up on the Pirate Bay, one of my friends I used to live with him, and we used to, change movies, like digitally written movies and sort of stuff like that. But essentially piracy, old school. And he alerted me to the fact that Super Meat Boy was in the top 50 games on most pirate on Pirate. And I was like, oh, really? And I never once felt slighted by it. Like, I never once felt like it was a bad thing. I actually went as far as to be very discouraged by the fact went off the 50 sellers in the first month. Not sellers, I guess. Pirate, or not sellers, opposite of sellers. But it wasn't. When it went off the top 50, I was like, that sucks. But what are you gonna do? And yeah, I mean, it's just a way of thinking about things. If you think about piracy as somebody who would have really paid for your stuff that is stealing from you, I'm sure you got hurt by it. I know that's not the reality. It's simply not. It's a very small percentage of people who pirate. Like, I firmly believe that a very small percentage of people who pirate games are actually people who are like, oh, this person, I'm not going to pay for anything. There's actually been people like that. Like, I remember a few people like emailing just to say they pirated Super Meat Boy or whatever, and they want about it because assholes. What the fuck on them though? Because they're fucking playing a game that I made. You dumbass. You fucking dumbass. Like, it's not a diss to me. Oh God, don't play my work and enjoy it. Oh wow, you're really hurting because you went out to risk of boxes in my game. Like, that's fucking fine with me. I'm doing just fine. But yeah, piracy is a weird thing. It's a weird time. Like, piracy is another reason why the industry sucks right now. Not because of pirating, because developers in the mainstream are trying to stop piracy, which isn't going to happen. But they're trying so hard to stop it by adding like really, really fucked up DRM. Like, I know last night Tommy was playing Diablo. It was actually Diablo, and then like the scrap thing in the middle of the fight, and he was fucking just pissed. And that's, of course, all because they require you to log on in order to do it, because it's a DRM thing, because they don't want you to pirate the game. So it's like when they also invest money into this too, a lot of money. There's a lot invested to piracy. I don't really believe it helps that much, because of course, in a lot of ways, the hackers are going to be like, that's a challenge, I'm going to try to hack that. And they're going to hack it. And it's going to be pirated regardless eventually. And it ends up discouraging. Like, the Binding of Isaac with the retail edition that I released is completely DRM free. There's a Steam version included if you want to play it on Steam, because, I mean, in all honesty, I'd rather have the Steam version than anything else, because there's achievements and it just feels easier to play. Nice little... I really like Steam. But on the disc, it's actually DRM free, and you could... Like, when I hand a disc off to my friend and they're like, oh, can I get another copy for a friend of mine? And I'll be like, oh, yeah, no, just copy that disc. It's DRM free. Just give it to who wants it. Well, it's not a thing. Like, when you're independent, you don't care as much about the money. You care more about the work and people appreciating your work. And I think that's the reality when it comes down to it. I just don't believe piracy is that much of a negative. It's pretty cool in a lot of ways. Like, being able to do things that I want to see, like of course I have an R4 and I have a main arcade in my house, which technically is completely illegal, but it's frustrating because it's like those people aren't even making money off those games anymore. Like, you can't buy those games anymore. Like, why play these? Why should they be playing these games? But, and that's the beauty of it, though, is like you can download every NES game ever made and play it on a handheld or play it on your computer and experience all these really cool things that are almost impossible to find now. Who's going to fucking go to a flea market or whatever and find, some random NES game that's like a complete little gem or whatever, and then put it on their half-broken Nintendo at home? Like, piracy is important. It preserves a history, and I like it for that. I don't even pirate music anymore. I mean, mostly because I have the ability to buy it. But like the new Fiona Apple album came out, I think I pirated an early copy of it because, of course, I'm a fan. Then I bought it. I bought it on Amazon digitally because I want to support the artist. And I like to believe that there are a lot of people like me out there who do. And obviously, because I'm not poor, like I'm able to support myself. So, all the fears of mainstream business of the internet, running and stealing out of the pockets of every businessman in the world just simply isn't true. So that's basically my stance on piracy.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to do the 2 logistical questions after, but I'm just going to stop the recording for a sec.
Hello, this is Edmund McMillen. You're listening to Natural Double D20s on WGTB Georgetown Radio.